You all like the film? Favorite line? One at a time. Hello, hello. Great. Thanks for coming out. Nicole, where are you?
Over here.
Come on over. Everybody, I'd like to introduce Bill Pullman.
Spaceballs lives. Yeah. Thank you all for coming.
Do you have your camera?
Wendy.
Who's taking the
Oh,
photo?
I didn't know that.
Phil has been so polite as to take a picture right now with Nicole.
Oh, God, I thought it was John Candy. That would be really a good trick.
Nicole will now enter into indentured servitude to ArcLight Cinemas. So thank you so much for coming out. We really, really appreciate it.
You bet.
So what we always do when we do the ArcLight Q&As is we really like to talk about what the filmmaking process was like. We'll throw it over to you guys for questions as well. And so the first question I'm going to ask is, this really was pretty much your first starring role.
Yeah, it's the second movie that I had done, and it was definitely a bump up from Ruthless People was the first movie, and I played a great part that I really enjoyed and never imagined that the next part would be a good large lead in a movie directed by Mel Brooks. It was a great privilege, yeah, and I was telling Jonathan just before we came out that I hadn't seen the movie since it first came out until last fall. I was in the Fantastic Film Fest in Austin, and the Alamo Draft House has this kind of wild movie-oki. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, where they put subtitles of the famous quote lines of the movie, and they kind of pop up and everyone chants the line, and it was like Spartacus for Spaceballs or something. But it was the first time I'd seen the movie in a while. So, and I'm working in town these months, and so I started now until May on a mini-series called Torchwood. Science fiction fans. A good spectrum between Spaceballs and Torchwood. But so I've been amazed at how that movie Spaceballs was, because when it first came out, the critics panned it. They just said this is not his best movie. It's clear that he's gone downhill. Mel Brooks is now no longer has it, and it was disappointing. And though there were fans, but they weren't as vocal as they became later on. And so over the years, suddenly, I think it was my wife's cousin came to have dinner with us, and we were talking, and then I mentioned something, a reference to somebody in Spaceballs, and he goes, okay, so we can talk about Spaceballs? Wow, this guy, and all of a sudden he started going into the dialogue for the movie. And I hadn't even remembered saying those words. So that started it, and then I realized this year after year, it seemed like the movie had a following that really went beyond a lot of other Mel's movies and my movies and things in terms of the support for it.
Well, that happens with a lot of films, and that's one of the great things about cult favorites.
No, it only happens with Spaceballs. I'm sorry. Happens with a lot of I'm sure it does.
It only happens with Bill Pullman films, and that's what really amazes me about how the industry works.
Yes, boy.
So why don't we talk about that? You get this call. What was the process of actually getting the film and finding out that you got the film?
Well, I it came kind of out of the blue. Mel is a good theater goer, and I was doing plays downtown in the Los Angeles Theater Center, and I was doing this very obscure pageant play called Barabbas, which was written by this, it was very strange, and I was...
Yes, it has a cult following.
Yes, as many of my work did. But and Mel and Anne Bancroft came down to see the play, and at that point I realized, boy, he really is thinking about me for this part. And then when I got it and went in to meet him, he said, "Yeah, I tried to get a Tom and I couldn't get him. I tried to get Tom Cruise, Tom Hanks, couldn't get him, so I got a Bill." Is that a joke, Mel? Or but he, I think, and it's true, he really kind of crafted the part, and he imagined he was going to get a big box office draw at the time, and I think he was hurt that they didn't take him up on it, But then it configured differently, attracting two of the big comics of that time, John Candy and Rick Moranis. And so once that kind of was secured, then he said, "Oh, heck, I'll get somebody nobody knows." And I got a chance to do it, yeah.
Well, they know you now.
Yeah. Well, it was a great privilege. It was shot it was the last movie for MGM that was shot on the lot when it was known as the MGM lot. And, the experience of going in, for me, showing up on the lot, I think I still have my parking pass from the first day I ever went on a lot. And then to go into these rehearsals, which Rick and John Candy were smart and said, "We don't come in for rehearsals." And Daphne and I were so glad to be there. "Oh yeah, we'll be there." And he would want to rehearse over and over again, and which was fine. And then we would go to the commissary, and Mel, being in his dust trail in the commissary, is the best place to be because he knows everybody there. And I remember going through there, and he's talking to Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jane Fonda, and they're giving us time too, which is a surprise. And you realize what an institution he was. He's such a gregarious guy, and so it was kind of a thrill. And then the MGM lot had its own significance because the scene which, where we go to meet Yogurt is such a clear takeoff of Wizard of Oz, and it was purely by production coincidence that we shot it in the same soundstage that they shot that scene from Wizard of Oz, which was kind of cool.
When you were working with him, and you talked about being in his dust trail when you're meeting all of the people, but what about in his thought process? Was he shooting off the script and giving you multiple takes? What was that process like? And my understanding is that he shoots a lot and then edits after.
Well, the first part was the rehearsal part where he does all the parts. He basically gives you line readings. Here he was, for us anyway. And I had my own trouble because I really liked everything he did. And when he would do Daphne Zuniga, it was really good. Seeing him, "Oh, I'm a Jewish princess," he was just so funny, and I would be like an audience member instead of like an actor who's, going to have a camera on. And I remember, it was a kind of a scary process a little bit because I had to wake up and realize, okay, now I gotta go toe to toe with this very funny guy. And, I think he always was gruff but affectionate with me. And then I didn't know how it would go on the set. And on the set, we, there was a kind of a strong deference to John and Rick in those scenes. Most of my stuff, of course, was with John, who, to this day, I don't think I've worked with anybody more generous than John Candy. just one of those extraordinary guys. And I was so lucky to have him as my mog. He was just always looking out for me, and if Mel got a little push, was pushing a little heavy, John would try to get in there, and he usually supported me on certain things.
Well, you actually answered one of the fan questions from Facebook. One of the other questions from Facebook that was a fan question is, did you get to keep the Schwartz ring?
Oh, yeah. Now if I could find it, my career would go really well.
All right, so we have two questions that we always ask, and then we'll throw it over to the audience. What was the best time, your best moment on this film where you just went, this is living the life, this is great? And conversely, what was the one moment where you're like, get me the hell out of here?
Do people answer this honestly?
Every single time.
And honestly?
It's what will make you a legend.
Well, I think that the favorite time, was we had that scene where we go out of we knock out the Spaceballs, and then we come out, and the Winnebago shakes, and then we come out and we're going towards we're coming in, and it was very crude filmmaking then as compared to now, and they couldn't get that fast shake of the Winnebago going the way they wanted to do it. So, and we had to come right out. So they had a lot of grips that were on the wings of the Winnebago, really heavy set guys that were going like this, and it was going really creaky, and Mel didn't like it so much. And so he said, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to overcrank the camera so it would go really fast. But then when you came out shooting, you had to run in slow motion, guys. And I remember, that I go, oh yeah, sure, that's good. I was the rookie, so I'm very excited about new things. And I realized that John had no interest in going slow motion. He was kind of really having a tough time at it. And I had just come out of acting classes where we spent all this time pretending we were in glue or something. I must have been sharp with my slow-mo. And that was when, at the end of that take, Mel said, Pullman, you're a genius at this. And it was the one little corner of geniusness that I could attain, I guess. But I did think that Mel, because Mel said, and I always remember some of the things, he said many great things I remember all my life. One is, Bill, 10% of anything is good. Wow, 10%. And sometimes I really often think he's right, that 10% is really good stuff. And
Usually when you're talking about gross of the film, right?
The what?
The gross of the film.
Gross of the film, yeah. That's probably what he was thinking of. He hasn't shared that part of it.
Well, that's what Spaceballs 2 is for. The quest for more money, right?
Right, yeah.
And your least favorite moment? We swear we'll edit it out.
Oh, God, I'm thinking of all the good moments, too, because being with the dinks in the desert, I didn't mention that. Maybe that was as good as the other one. But the bad one, okay, the bad one.
If you don't have one, you don't have to have one.
No, I think it was, there were some challenging times. We never had, nobody had really done a lot of green screen at that point. And somebody had told somebody that we should worry that our eyes would be damaged if we sat around in the green screen set. It seems so archaic. But we were given sunglasses to put on in between the takes. And we were sitting in, at the command module of the Winnebago and, going back and forth with, what to do in the scenes. And then somebody would go, oh, the sunglasses. And then everybody would put on their sunglasses and still have these very earnest talks about what's really funny in this scene. I remember thinking, this is really funny. We should shoot this. But then the sunglasses would get them off and it was never as funny.
Why don't we ask some questions over here? Who'd like to ask one? I can't see anything. Anybody have a question? Really? Seriously? There's an entire audience of people here and not one? No, you're too late now. Too late, sir.
So I'm sure when you shot the scene with Pizza the Hut, you actually didn't see him. So when did you actually see it, and what did you think of the actual character that played Pizza the Hut?
Well, I remember they were very, very eager to get a great-looking Pizza the Hut. And just seeing that credits list again, all those people were really great people. Ben Nye Jr., who did the makeup, and then Ken Diaz, who did a lot of the special effects. He continues to work a lot, and I ran across him in other movies. But, I remember Mel said, come over here, Pullman. We're going to go see the test on Pizza the Hut. And it was like watching, I don't know, I don't want to say, but there, you know, Mel was so serious as he walked and stood in front of Pizza the Hut. And, you know, they got it all steam going and everything, cooking and everything. And then it ended and they were all laughing, you know, kind of like to help sell the big work that they had done. And Mel's not laughing. He goes, I want that bubble to like pop like a fart. Straight serious. That's what he had.
I think my favorite part is when the actual piece of pepperoni falls off, hits the eye, and then lands in its mouth, and it keeps talking. What other questions do we have?
Yeah, I was wondering, have you ever met Harrison Ford, and did he have anything to say about your role in this film?
I don't think he cared.
There's an actually interesting story. Mel Brooks presented the script to George Lucas because he wanted to make sure that George would be offended by it. And George was just like, go for it, it's really good. But the deal was that none of the merchandising, which included a flamethrower, by the way, could be actually sold in the real world.
Oh, yeah.
Which is why you don't have a flamethrower.
Which is why there's no Spaceballs too.
Who else?
I was wondering about John Candy, who was so wonderful, and there's so many movies we all love him in, but I was wondering what he was like, kind of, I mean, he's so funny on camera, but off camera, was he kind of a jokester, more serious? I'm just curious about it a little bit.
Well, you know, he had a very gentle sense of humor, and I think he was concerned going into this movie with, it was like two schools of thought about comedy. You know, Mel comes from a very vaudevillian-based Yiddish theater kind of punchlines, get the joke, go for it, you know. And John's was much more out of that SCTV, and it was kind of out of the side of his mouth, and you know, it wasn't as predictable or as, you know, as kind of codified maybe as Mel's. And I think John was nervous about that somewhat, but in his own way, because he was very friendly with everybody. But he used to invite me to his trailer so I could share his Pritikin diet food with him, which he was trying to do, the Pritikin diet. Do you ever hear that thing?
Yes.
Yeah. And largely, his version of that diet was eating some of that soup and then getting Frankie, his driver, to bring him donuts afterwards. So it was a good lunch to get in on. But he, at a couple of times I can remember, because he's a large man, you know, and at a couple of times he was sweating, you know, and he said, man, you know, I used to have a lot of fun with this, and every once in a while I can not be fun. and you know, he had to go into makeup for like 3 hours every day before he started to work and everything. And that was the only little complaint that I ever heard him say, you know, just briefly. But because I think, you know, and he was always one, and he actually always would kind of encourage me to come up with stuff. So like the paw, give me more the paw, you know, that was something that I made up with him, and I assumed it would be junked by Mel, going, oh, Pullman thought of that? No. But John liked it and fought for it, and that's how we ended up doing the handshake. And I always thought he was, you know, very class act. And then here's the telling story about John Candy, because we were shooting somewhere north on I-5, somewhere off on I-5. So it was kind of far away from the set, from LA. And he got released midday, and which I think had been prearranged because he's a huge Dodger fan, and he was going to go see the game. And you know, Mel made a big thing. All right, everyone else, we're going to continue working. John Candy is going to go to a Dodger game. And John said, that's right, I'm off. Tell Fluffy and Schmucks, you know, see you later. And he took off. And then midway through the afternoon, 4 trucks show up, and out of the back come all the concessions from the Dodgers. Hot dogs, popcorn, everything, and they set up around the set, and everybody got free hot dogs and popcorn on John Candy.
One last question over here? Okay, you would have, okay.
Did Mel ever talk about what might happen in the sequel?
You know, I think it was so clearly, you know, his disgust for this forever sequels. And he's never done a sequel, and I don't think he ever really intended to. For him, it was, you know, it's someone who's looking to just pull the cash machine a second time, you know, and he would never do that.
Okay, last one over there.
We know for a fact you've got a few filmmakers in the audience. Would you consider, we offered to see you now, would you do it again?
If I got offered to do Spaceballs again?
2.
Oh, 2! You know, that you always have a, you know, hope and fear about that. Because I think, you know, you know, always with a good, especially in science fiction, you know, like with Independence Day, there's always been that thought of, what about the follow-up on that? And, you know, it's been danced around, and you hope that the idea is going to be as good. And I think with Independence Day, they have a great idea. It's just figuring out with the rights in the studio and everything. And I'm sure Mel, he's probably got a great idea of how to do it again if he ever got, you know, inclined. It would be a musical, probably, like producing.
Okay, so, do you mind answering that? Sure. Go ahead.
So you brought up Independence Day. I have to ask, do you have the speech memorized?
Humorously, that was asked on Facebook and on Twitter when I asked them. They're like, did you do the speech?
No. No, I'm always impressed when I hear it, and I'm impressed when I hear, you know, people will tell me that they did it in acting class or something, and then they'll start into it. And I always am very supportive. But we did do a takeoff on it at that same, you know, these crazy people at the Alamo Draft House, the Fantastic Fest. They had this weird parody of Independence Day, and they gave me a speech where I essentially gave the same speech, but in honor of a different holiday, which was St. Patrick's Day. And it was a pretty funny thing. I think it's on YouTube. I think you can see it if you're interested in Bill Pullman doing a mangle of the speech.
You will find that and post that on Facebook. What was your favorite line from the movie?
From what movie? This Baseball?
your favorite line from Independence Day? And can you do it?
I think it was, I think I didn't have a favorite line, I guess, I love Rick Moranis's lines. For some reason, I think he really got that part really well, and I remember there were some scenes that he made up, he actually kind of worked it out and encouraged Mel to let him do it, and that whole work doing the little dolls fighting each other, I think that's my favorite moment of the movie. Just somehow kind of strange and meta or something about it.
It worked. Actually, my favorite part is when John Candy gets up, he's like, oh God, it's going to leave a mark. And I understand that was also an improv as well.
Yeah. I think it was, you're right, it was, yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank Bill Pullman. I hope you all
Thank you all for coming. Good.